we are going to chant the prayers to the departed Vaishnavas. And then we'll speak about Ramananda Roy today. And he has many wonderful instructions he gave to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And some of his pastimes are quite amazing. Okay, we'll speak about him in a second. Jai Anila Prema Janna Karuna Pracho Paramahansa Paravaticacharya, Avasatata, Satashi Shima, His Divine Grace, Abhaya Chandana, Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Shri Das Thakur Ki Jai, Forever say Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadha Shri Vasudhi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radhakrishna Go Bhagavata Sayam Kunda, Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Tiranam Ki Jai, Goswami Ki Jai, Himalaya Ki Jai, Shrimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai, Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Go Premananda. All glories the assembled devotees, all glories the assembled devotees, all glories the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda. Hari Hari Bol. So we'll read the translation to this poem, written by Srila Narottama Das Thakur, Saparshila Gora Viraha Vilapa. He brought the treasure of divine love and was filled with compassion and mercy. Where is such a personality as Srinivasa Acharya gone? Where are my Swarup Damodar? And Rupa Goswami, where is Sanatan? Where is Raghunath Das, the savior of the fallen? Where are my Raghunath Bhatt and Gopal Bhatta? And where is Krishnadas Kaviraj? Where did Lord Gauranga, the great dancer, suddenly go? I will smash my head against the rock and enter into the fire. Where will I find Lord Gauranga, the reservoir of all wonderful qualities? Being unable to obtain the association of Lord Gauranga, accompanied by all of these devotees, in whose association he performed his pastimes, Narottama Das simply weeps. So, Om Ganat Tinadanda Shah Kananjana Shlaka Chaksura Meditam Yena Tasmai Shigare Namaha. So, as we mentioned, today is the commemoration of the disappearance day of Srila Ramananda Roy. So, a little history about Ramananda Roy before we actually, or a little ontological talks about Ramananda Roy before we start talking about the pastimes. So, Ramananda Roy, of course, is considered, according to the Gora Ganadesh Deepika. Welcome. According to the Gora Ganadesh Deepika, Ramananda Roy is considered to be an incarnation of both Vishaka and Arjuna, which is very interesting. When you think of the different rasas and rasa bus, I mean, it's definitely an interesting combination. So, sometimes, just to talk about incarnations and sometimes combined incarnations and things like that, that sometimes incarnations are an empowered incarnation. I'm not saying that that's the case of Ramananda Roy. Ramananda Roy is definitely Vishaka. And sometimes incarnations are the actual person, just like we have in the incarnations of Krishna, or the avatars, to be more precise. Avatars of Krishna, we have Shakavesha avatars, as well as Vishnu Tattva avatars, and we also have Guna avatars, Manvantara avatars, and some of these avatars are Vishnu Tattva, directly the Lord, Advaita Tuta, Nadirananta Rupam, Ajum Pranama Purusham, Laviyovanam Cha. And some of them are Jiva souls. And some of them are Lord Shiva, which is a different category. So in other words, that's how you could definitely understand Arjuna, Vishaka, and some of these things. And there's another way to understand it too, is that the residents of Raj, Goloka Vrindavan in the spiritual world, they actually expand as the residents of the other abodes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's another way to understand it. In other words, you'll have a coward boy, just to give one example, in Goloka pastimes who expands as Garuda. the bird carrier of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when we're talking about someone incarnates as someone else, it gets quite complicated, and it's not really mentioned in the Gorgana Dashtipika or these other literatures exactly what is the categories there. But anyway, it's described that he is a combined incarnation of Vishaka and Arjuna. And it's also described that his father, Bhavananda Roy, is an incarnation of Pandu. And the sons of Bhavananda Roy are incarnations of the 5 sons of Pandu, the Pandavas. And just like there's that interesting story in the Chaitanya Charitamrita about Gopinath Pattanayaka, who was another son of Bhavananda Roy. And Gopinath Pattanayaka, he was basically, he offended the prince, and because of that he was condemned to die, and he was chanting Hare Krishna as he was condemned to die, and Lord Chaitanya gave him mercy. But I'm not going to tell that story today, because that's not about Ramananda Roy. So Ramananda Roy and the whole family, the Bhavananda Roy and his whole family, were considered to be a Shudra family, like a Kayasta caste. Kayasta sometimes is considered to be like Vaishya, Shudra, but generally Shudra. And because of that, being in a Shudra caste, and also he was in charge of the Madras, that whole area around Madras, which is today called Chennai, then he wasn't considered so elevated. Now you may question why Lord Chaitanya had associates, or even the Namacharya, coming from lower castes. And certainly Haridas Thakur not only came from, he didn't come from a lower caste, he came from a no caste, because he was born in another religion, which we can't mention to be politically correct nowadays. You got to be careful what you say. So anyway, he was born in a different religion. So why did Chaitanya Mahaprabhu do this? I mean, why didn't he just have all of his associates, like what Gopal Bhatta Goswami, you know, very high caste, Brahminical family, and why did he have some associates, or even like Jiva Goswami? Jiva Goswami was from Vaishya caste. You know, why? Or we just read the prayers of Narottama Das Thakur. He was also considered like, was a king and also Shudra caste. So why does Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu do this? Simple answer is, Kiva Vipra Kiva Nyasi Shudra Kenanoi Ye Krishna Padaveta Say Guru Hoy. As Srila Prabhupada explains, and Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he was doing this to show these ritualistic brahmanas that actually they're nonsense. That actually if someone knows the science of Krishna, then he's automatically considered to be in the highest platform, or even guru. And of course in the Vedic literatures there are statements to that same extent. Aho bhattasva pachatal garyanyati vagri vardhate namatu vyakti pustupustuhu varsharsnarari ya ramanuchar nama grananti ote. It says that how wonderful it is, aho bhattasva pachatal garyan, that if someone is chanting the holy names of the Lord, it's understood that he's performed so many preliminary practices and come to the platform of being a Brahmin, not a ritualistic Brahmin, but a Brahmin in essence. A Brahmin in essence is one who knows Brahman. It's an interesting story where devotees in Vrindavan went to see some temple, I think it was Radha Raman temple, and the person, one of the Goswamis, Goswami caste, we're not talking about Goswami sannyasi, one of the Goswamis was telling the devotees, you know, you're all very sincere, continue devotional service, and if you're very sincere in your next life, you will take birth as a Brahmin. Otherwise, no way, Jose, of going back to Godhead. He didn't say Jose, of course. It reminds me also in ISKCON, the chauvinistic males would tell the woman that the best you can do in your next life is what? Anybody can guess? Take birth as a man. If you're really sincere, yeah, actually we had this in this time, and we probably still do to a certain extent. The best you can do is take birth as a man. Then you can go back to Godhead. Pretty bold, you know. God, I'm a man, can't be prouder. If you don't like it, I'm gonna yell a little louder. So, anyway, so this ritualistic Brahmana said this. He was a devotee, but he was also into ritualism, Brahmanism. And he said this to the devotees. The devotees went back to Prabhupada a little confused. And they said, Srila Prabhupada, he said that the best we can do, you know, we just chant sincerely, serve you, and then we can take birth as actual Brahmins and actual Vaishnavas. Prabhupada said, no, you can go back and tell him that if he does his service very well, then he can take birth in the Krishna conscious movement, the West, and join the Krishna conscious movement. Prabhupada had a real sarcastic sense of humor sometimes. So, anyway, so this is why Lord Chaitanya did that. I mean, obviously, he could have had everybody born in a, you know, super high-class, ritualistic, Brahminical family, you know, Gupta, Trivedi, Chaturvedi, Dvivedi, Ekavedi, Novedi. You know, he could have had people born in all these, but he didn't, for the specific reason of showing the world that anybody can become a pure devotee of Krishna. Anyone can become to the highest platform of being a Brahmin. Because Lord Chaitanya's mission is to save the whole world. Dinahini Atachilo, Purinam, Udavilo. But if one is fallen, one is elevated, if one takes a Harinam, then that's it. Everything's there in the holy name. Namachintamani Krishna's Chaitanya Rasa Vigra. Purnashura Nichabuddho, Vinatwam, Namanami, no. So that's our point. If we should have faith in the holy name. Of course, if you don't continue chanting the holy name, then Punar Mushika Baba, Puna Lacha Baba, Puna Vaisha Baba, Punar whatever Baba there is. So you have to be really careful. Just like I was looking at some pictures of Prabhupada in the early days and just looking at some of the devotees, and I said, where are they now? You know, some of the devotees have left. You know, some of the prominent devotees that were surrounding Prabhupada. And I was thinking, why is that? Because there was a neglect of the sadhana. Very, very important sadhana. You know, sometimes we think, you know, we just have to have a nice kirtan and be ecstatic. But sadhana is essential. Vaidhi is essential. If we think we're too elevated to be executing Vaidhi bhakti, which means, Prabhupada said, rising early in the morning and chanting our rounds and hearing Bhagavatam class and worshiping the deities and all those other things. If we think we're so elevated we can just be ecstatic and stay up late at night and everything like that, then hasta la vista, eventually. Of course, I'll translate that. That means see you later, alligator, in Spanish. So anyway, so we have to be careful. Prabhupada said, the problem with you Western boys and girls, that was Prabhupada's quote, but nowadays, since everybody in India is westernized, so the problem with you westernized boys and girls is that you're not enough afraid of Maya. You think, I can play with Maya. Let me have a good game with Maya, you know, see if she actually works. Anyway, so apart from that, let's talk about Ramananda Roy before we do too much preaching for the bully pulpit. So, getting back to the story about Ramananda Roy. So, Ramananda Roy was like the viceroy in charge of Madras, Chennai. And when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was planning out his South India tour, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who was from a Brahminical family, came to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and said to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you should meet Ramananda Roy. He is the governor of Madras, And don't think that he's just an ordinary person. He's a great devotee. Because previously, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who was previously a Brahmavadi, that means someone who didn't accept that the personal form of Krishna was actually the highest. Brahmavadi is more like an agnostic. In other words, he wasn't a Mayavadi is the difference. Mayavadi is one who decries the Supreme Personality of Godhead and says that the Supreme Personality of Godhead's body is Maya, or illusion. But he just didn't know. And he was preaching from the Vedanta Sutra, and Lord Chaitanya actually dissuaded him from following his, or Shankaracharya's interpretation of Vedanta Sutra, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya became a great devotee. So he said, previously I never really appreciated Ramananda Roy. So he used to have these heated discussions with Ramananda Roy, in which Ramananda Roy was presenting the Vaishnava viewpoint, and also his son-in-law Gopinath, or brother-in-law, sorry, Gopinath, he was having discussions with in the same regard. So he said, now I understand Ramananda Roy's exalted position, go to see him. So what happened is that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to South India, and he eventually, of course this is in Andhra Pradesh, he arrived on the banks of the Godavari, and he crossed the river, and at the same time there was a lot of musical sounds, and there was a person, which was Ramananda Roy, seated on a palanquin, and he went to take his bath. He was followed by brahmanas who were doing all the Vedic rituals. So he took his bath and offered oblations to his forefathers because he was following the Vedic tradition. Because in those days, even those who were in a lower caste would actually follow the Vedic tradition. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw him at a distance, and he understood that this person was Ramananda Roy. And it's described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that his mind was running after him. That means he saw him. He wanted to associate with him. So he remained patiently sitting because he wanted to observe the social etiquette. So Ramananda Roy, seeing this wonderful, beautiful sannyasi, came to see him. And then he saw that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was as brilliant as 100 suns. And he was wearing a saffron garment, and it's described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He was large in body, very strongly built, and his eyes were like lotus petals, not like our eyes. Our eyes are just like beady little marbles. And he immediately offered obeisances, fell down flat like a rod. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very eager to embrace him. Actually, Lord Chaitanya stood up and he began to chant the holy name of Krishna. And Lord Chaitanya inquired, "Are you Ramananda Roy?" And Ramananda Roy replied, "Yes, I am your very low servant, and I am a Shudra." And so what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did then shocked everybody, all the ritualistic Brahmins. What he did is he embraced him. Now, if you know about Indian culture, or you've been in India, if you have like a low-class person, Shudra, and someone's a Brahmin, even if the Shudra steps on your shadow, it's a disaster, and previously they used to get beat up for doing that. That's how strict it was. And you never invite them to your home, or even if they were in your home, they'd simply be your servant and you treat them like a dog. I've even seen that in India too. There's sometimes these couple, I visit people in their homes, and they would have some servant and they treat them worse than dogs get treated in America. Of course, dogs get treated in America better than people, so that's, I don't even know if that's an appropriate example. You know, people worship their dogs and get them, anyway, send them to the hotels during the weekends. Well, they got to visit dog hotels, dog psychiatrists, crazy. Of course, India is following in that regard now. Even when I was walking recently in Juhu Beach, you would see people in India walking their dogs and waiting for their dogs to pass the stool. this is very bad. So anyway, so then what happened? Their natural love was awakened, as described, and they fell on the ground, and they both experienced paralysis, ecstatic symptoms, shivering, palpitations, all those different symptoms. And the word Krishna came from both their mouths. So that's called Vyabhachari Bhava, Sanchari Bhava. There's 33 of those different symptoms, which are intermittent and uncontrollable when they appear in the body of a pure devotee. So the Brahmanas were thinking, what the heck is going on here? You know, there's this Brahman, he looks like, there's this sannyasi, he looks like Brahman, you know, he's fulgent. And he's embracing his lower class Shudra. And you know, even perhaps Ramananda Roy was darker in complexion too. Because in India there's a lot of racism too. Like you see the Bollywood stars, they're all whiter than me basically, which is crazy. It's insane. I mean, racism is the stupidest thing in the world. So, anyway, so what is he doing? He's embracing this Shudra. And also, Ramananda Roy is a very learned person. You know, he's a Shudra, but also very intelligent. He's very grave. Why has he become restless like a crazy man? Because they've never seen him exhibit that before. You know, he's always just, yes, let's talk philosophy, do all the Vedic rituals, yes, sir, yes, sir. And all of a sudden, oh, God. You know, he's just like rolling on the ground, perspiring, crying, and all those other things. So Ramananda Roy and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu discussed this. This is not such a good idea in front of these people. They're going to criticize us. So let's meet later. So Lord Chaitanya, this is a quote. Lord Chaitanya said, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya has spoken of your good qualities, and he's made a great endeavor to convince me to meet you. Indeed, I have come here just to meet you. It is very good that even without making an effort, I have gotten your interview here. And then Ramananda Roy, in a very humble way, actually praises Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And he says, I am the lowest man amongst the four castes. You do not fear the Vedic injunctions stating you should not associate with a Shudra. You are not contemptuous of my touch. Although in the Vedas you are forbidden to associate with Shudras, you are the Supreme Personality of God himself. No one can understand your purpose. You are touching me, although this is not sanctioned in the Vedic literatures. You have come here to deliver me. These are all quotes from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And Lord Chaitanya said, Sir, you are the best of topmost devotees. Therefore, upon seeing you, everyone's heart is melted. Although I am a Mayavadi sannyasi, a non-devotee, I'm floating in the ocean because Lord Chaitanya took sannyas in the Mayavad Sampradaya. Actually, he was a devotee. Actually, he took sannyas in a devotee Sampradaya because he reinitiated Keshava Bharti before Keshava Bharti gave him sannyas. There's that whole story. When Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was getting ready to take sannyas from Keshava Bharti Maharaj, then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said to Keshava Bharti that last night I had a dream and I heard this mantra, sannyas mantra. Let me whisper it in your ear to see if it's the right mantra. So he whispered it in his ear. And he actually, because the mantra, that's how you initiate someone. It's not a fire sacrifice, it's getting a mantra. That's the initiation. And so he initiated his guru before his guru initiated him. So that's pretty good. Don't try that with your guru. So, anyway, so Lord Chaitanya said, I'm floating in the ocean of love simply by touching you, what to speak of others. Knowing this in order to rectify my heart, which is very hard, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya asked me to meet you. So then a Vaishnava Brahmin came forward, invited the Lord to accept his meal, and then it was decided that they would meet later on that day. And here's the list of Bhavananda Roy's 5 sons. Ramananda, Gopinath, Kalanidhi, Shuranidhi, and Vaninath. So then, in the afternoon, after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had eaten and taken his bath, he met with Ramananda Roy and they discussed about the purposes of life. And I'm going to read. Yeah. And anyway, they went through a whole series, a whole hierarchy. I'm not going to read this right now. They went through a whole hierarchy at first where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was taking the position of a student and Ramananda Roy was taking the position of a professor. And basically, first Ramananda Roy said the most important thing is varnashram. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said this is simply external. And of course, it's external, but we want to use varnashram to organize society, but it is external, it's not the goal. But it keeps everybody's needs met so they can proceed further, as we've mentioned many times before. Unless one's basic needs in society are met, that means engaging according to one's psychophysical nature, then one can't be happy and progress further. So Prabhupada said, one of the duties of the spiritual master is to engage the disciple according to their psychophysical nature. So anyway, so there was a whole hierarchy, and then later on Lord Chaitanya rejected, and then he talked about, Ramananda Roy said, renouncing the fruits of one's activities, and ultimately it came to rendering formal service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then serving the Lord in devotion mixed with knowledge, and finally, pure devotional service. And then they went higher and higher and higher and talked about, ultimately, through the different rasas, to the conjugal ras, and then eventually the mood of Srimati Radharani, and even further the mood of Vipralamba Seva, of Srimati Radharani, worshipping the Supreme Lord in a mood of separation. So, that was one discussion. The next day they had another discussion. Yeah, here it is. There was another discussion, which is really interesting, and I'm going to read some of the dialogue. So Lord Chaitanya inquired of all types of education, which is the most important? And Ramananda Roy replied, no education is important other than the transcendental devotional service of Krishna. He didn't say it's the most important. He says no other education is important other than the transcendental devotional service of Krishna. Of course, we understand sometimes in the service of Krishna, devotees have some education. Like we have devotees with master's degrees from Duke University and PhDs from Cambridge, just now coming. So then Lord Chaitanya asked, out of all the glorious activities, what is the most glorious? Ramananda Roy replied, that person who is reputed to be a devotee of Lord Krishna enjoys the utmost fame and glory. Lord Chaitanya then asked, of many capitalists, who possesses the greatest riches? Who is the topmost? And Ramananda replied, he who is richest in love for Radha and Krishna is the greatest capitalist. Lord Chaitanya asked, of all kinds of distress, what is the most painful? Apart from separation from the devotee of Krishna, I know no unbearable happiness. Wow. Of course, that's similar to what Lord Chaitanya said about the qualities of a Vaishnava, satsanga jage, Vaishnavachara. Vaishnava rejects all bad association. Out of all liberated persons, who should be accepted as the greatest? Ramananda Roy replied, he who has love for Krishna has attained the topmost liberation. Next, among many songs, which song is to be considered the actual religion of the living entity? Ramananda Roy replied, that song describing the loving affairs of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna, superior to all the songs. Lord Chaitanya said, of all auspicious and beneficial activities, what is best for the living entity? Ramananda Roy replied, the only auspicious activity is association with the devotees of Krishna. Wow. Lord Chaitanya asked, what should all living entities remember? And Ramananda Roy replied, the chief objects of remembrance are always the Lord's holy name, qualities, and pastimes. Ramananda Roy Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu further inquired, out of many types of meditation, what is required for all living entities? And Ramananda Roy replied, the chief duty of every living entity is to meditate upon the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. Wow. We're almost finished. Lord Chaitanya said, where should the living entity live, abandoning all other places? Ramananda Roy replied, he should live in the holy place known as Vrindavana Brajabhumi, where the Lord performed his rasa dance. So if someone is absorbed in Krishna consciousness, they're always in Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya asks of all the topics people listen to, what is the best for all living entities? Ramananda Roy replied, hearing about the loving affairs between Radha and Krishna is most pleasing to the ear. Lord Chaitanya asked, among all worshipable objects, which is the chief? The reply is, the chief worshipable object is the holy name of Radha and Krishna, the Hare Krishna mantra. Jai. And what is the destination of those who desire liberation and those who desire sense gratification? Ramananda Roy replied, those who attempt to merge into the existence of the Supreme Lord will have to accept bodies like those of trees. And those who are overly inclined towards sense gratification will obtain the bodies of demigods. That means in Vedic sense gratification. He's not, you have to understand the context. He's not referring to those in America who are overly inclined towards sense gratification. They will become pigs or less. Those who are devoid of all transcendental malice are like crows that suck the juice from bitter fruits of the nimber tree of knowledge. This is Ramananda Roy talking. Whereas those who enjoy the malice are like the cuckoos who eat the buds of the mango tree of love of Godhead. Ramananda Roy concluded, the unfortunate empiric philosophers taste the dry process of philosophical knowledge, whereas the devotees regularly drink the nectar of love of Krishna. Therefore, they are the most fortunate of all. And closing, I want to tell the story of Ramananda Roy's complete detachment from this material world, which is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Ansha Leela. So, once upon a time, there was a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu known as Prajuna Mishra. And he heard that Lord Chaitanya had discussed these intimate topics with Ramananda Roy along the banks of the Godavari. And he went to Lord Chaitanya, this was in Jagannath Puri, of course, because Ramananda Roy at this particular juncture had renounced his service. I mean, he still remained in the Grahastha ashram, but he had renounced his being the governor of Madras, and he was given like a full pension, actually more than full pension, by King Prataparudra, and he was residing in Jagannath Puri along with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Prajuna Mishra was there also. So Prajuna Mishra went to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and said, I want to hear about these topics that you discussed with Ramananda Roy. And Lord Chaitanya said, basically in a very humble way, whatever I know, I know because of Ramananda Roy. So you should go to hear from him. So Ramananda Roy, at this particular juncture, was engaged in something that none of us should do. He was teaching these two Devi Dasis. The Devi Dasis, nowadays, of course, that's considered very, very low class because, low-class ladies or prostitution. But in those days, there were ladies who danced before the deities of Lord Jagannath or in different temples, and they didn't dance in public. They just danced before the deities for the deities' pleasure. It's not like public dancing. So anyway, so they danced. So he was training them up, and not only training them up, he was bathing them, putting their makeup on, rubbing their bodies with oil. Something that I do not suggest men do on a regular basis, or even on a temporary basis. So anyway, so Prajuna Mishra goes to see Ramananda Roy, and he asks the servant, where's Ramananda Roy? And the servant of Ramananda Roy describes what Ramananda Roy is doing, and Prajuna Mishra thinks, Hare Krishna. And he goes back to Lord Chaitanya. He has his doubts. Ramananda Roy comes back after some time, but it's a little late, so Prajuna Mishra goes back to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and tells Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu what is happening. Lord Chaitanya said, I consider myself a very renounced sannyasi, but even if I hear the name of a woman or see the form of the woman, I feel changes in the body and mind. Be very humble, obviously. But Ramananda Roy has a special prerogative. Why does he have that special prerogative? Because obviously Lord Chaitanya is just acting as if he were an ordinary sannyasi, an ordinary person, but he's not, obviously. But he has that special prerogative because he's actually Vishaka, and he's identifying himself with his spiritual body. That's real renunciation. Real renunciation isn't just to spit at everything that attracts you. Just like, for example, I always mention to the devotees how I'm attracted to Teslas. Anyway, so, and every time I see one of those, yeah. So that's how I deal with my attraction to the material energy. Rah! What a nonsense car. So anyway, it's funny. Or Maserati, not Maserati. So, but the real way to become renounced is Ratso Varjan, Ratso Pirsa, Prabhupada Vartate. I was actually listening to a talk that Prabhupada gave, I think it was yesterday, and Prabhupada was talking about to someone who was asking, you know, what do your people do about their sex desire? Prabhupada said they have a higher taste. So Ramananda Roy was absorbed in his spiritual identity. So if a devotee is absorbed in the spiritual identity, then even though, as the Bhagavad Gita is described, he may sit up or lie down or do this, he knows that he's not doing any of those things. That's a very high platform. It means you actually reach perfection. So until you reach perfection, don't fool around with Maya. You don't think, you know, you can bathe the Devi Dasis. So he was doing that. And so Lord Chaitanya described this, and then Pradyumna Mishra went back to speak to Ramananda Roy. Ramananda Roy was in the assembly house where he met people, that's what it meant. And then for the whole day they discussed intimate pastimes of Radha and Krishna. And Pradyumna Mishra went back to Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya said, have you heard these discussions? And then Pradyumna Mishra said, yes, I have so much nectar I've heard. And again, Lord Chaitanya said that Ramananda, the prerogative to do those things, you know, with the dancing girls, is only that of Ramananda Roy's. So this is the exalted position of Ramananda Roy, that he is Vishaka. So that's his identity. So anyway, so that's glorification of Ramananda Roy. We have about 2 minutes left in class. Any questions or comments? Yes?
Is it Ramananda Roy is incarnation of Vishaka and Arjuna?
Yeah.
So there's different moods?
I know there's different moods. So what I described in the beginning of the class that my understanding is that he's actually Vishaka, and then there's the mood of Arjuna in assisting Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Krishna himself. So Arjuna is empowering. Sometimes these incarnations, it's not that they're two different people, but these incarnations, let's say, may be empowered by another personality. Just like, you know, just like one time, Prabhupada said about one of my godbrothers, he's like empowered by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So the devotees, it's a crazy story, but the devotees took that literally and said that he was an incarnation of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. This happened in New York. Do you remember that? I'll tell you privately who I'm talking about. And later on, this devotee had some spiritual difficulty, and the devotees thought, you know, incarnation of Bhakti, probably said, incarnation of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. No, it said Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was empowering him at that particular juncture. Just like we can be empowered by Prabhupada, or by the acharyas in our sampradaya. So, you know, you could say, you know, Prabhupada's incarnating through you, but it's not you become Prabhupada. You know, that would be impersonalism, whatever. Yes?
I was curious if you might be willing to unpack association, because, you know, Prabhupada talked about pure goodwill.
Saved by the bell.
Yeah, really.
Just have to be careful who we associate with, what their level of devotional service is, but we have to respect everyone and love everybody else. But we don't associate intimately with those who are materialistic, either materialistic or against Krishna. Those two different types of bad association. Okay, on that happy note, Saved by the Bell.